The grandfathers of cocaine. Part 1. On the northwest coast of Spain lies Galicia, a rugged stretch of land shaped by fog, cliffs, and the Atlantic Ocean. For generations, the sea provided everything. It fed families, built towns, and punished mistakes without mercy. Life here depended on tides, weather, and silence. By the late 1990s, the sea stopped providing. Fishing quotas tightened. Fuel prices climbed. European regulations crushed small family boats. Harbors that once buzzed with life grew quiet. Boats were sold or abandoned. Men who had worked the ocean their entire lives suddenly had no future. These men were not criminals. They were captains, deckhands, and mechanics. Many were in their 60s and 70s, retired on paper only. They still knew every current, every hidden cove, every stretch of coastline radar could not see. Galicia had another truth. Smuggling had long been part of life here. Cigarettes and alcohol moved along the coast during hard times. It was not celebrated, but it was understood. Everyone knew. No one talked. When cocaine began flooding Europe, smugglers noticed Galicia immediately. Thousands of inlets, villages that protected their own, a coastline built for secrecy. Early traffickers were careless. Flashy spending and violence drew attention. Police responded hard. Arrests followed. Some disappeared, but the opportunity remained. Quiet meetings began in kitchens and garages. Former fishermen spoke in low voices. They did not say cocaine. They called it cargo. The connection came through an old smuggler with ties to Colombia. The Colombians were not looking for violence. They wanted experience. Men who could cross open ocean at night without lights. Men who stayed calm when engines failed or weather turned. Galicia had those men. The first shipment was a test. A container ship dropped packages offshore. 3 fishing boats left 3 different ports before dawn. They met at sea, transferred the cargo, and returned as if it were a normal night's work. No noise, no mistakes, no trace. Payment came quickly, in cash. Rules were set immediately. No violence, no selling locally, no flashy spending, no talking, ever. Cocaine became ice. Police became bad weather. Ledgers looked like fuel logs. Locals soon whispered a name. The grandfathers. They did not buy mansions or sports cars. They paid debts, fixed engines, opened small cafes. Their lives improved quietly. To police, they looked like aging fishermen finally catching a break. By 2003, shipments grew larger. Hundreds of kilos became tons. Multiple boats moved through fog so thick lights were useless. Some crews were well into their 70s. The Atlantic had become their highway. What they did not realize was that success attracts attention. And while police stopped watching the docks, they had begun watching the water from above. The lights offshore would not go unnoticed forever. Part 2. By the early 2000s, the grandfathers were no longer testing the waters. They had mastered them. What began as small shipments quickly scaled into a disciplined operation, moving tons of cocaine into Europe with near-perfect precision. Unlike younger crews, the grandfathers did not argue, rush, or panic. Every pickup happened on time. Every boat returned safely. Every kilo arrived exactly where it was supposed to. Trust formed quickly, and with trust came larger shipments. Cargo ships crossing the Atlantic carried cocaine hidden deep in containers or sealed in waterproof bundles. At predetermined coordinates, far from shore and radar coverage, the packages were dropped into the sea. Sometimes they floated, sometimes they sank just below the surface, marked only by GPS. That was when the fishing boats moved. They left port at staggered times to avoid suspicion. No lights, no radios, only experience and timing. At sea, they worked silently, pulling heavy packages aboard and covering them with nets, ice, and fish. Before sunrise, the boats were back in harbor, unloading what looked like an ordinary catch. On land, the operation was just as careful. The cocaine moved through warehouses disguised as fish storage facilities. Trucks with legitimate paperwork carried the loads across Spain and into France, Germany, and the Netherlands. From there, it spread across Europe. Money flowed back the same way, cleaned through fishing cooperatives, small businesses, and property bought under relatives' names. No sudden wealth, no luxury lifestyles. Everything stayed quiet. The grandfathers enforced strict discipline. No violence was tolerated. Anyone who attracted attention was removed permanently. They believed the moment fear entered the operation, it would fail. For years, it worked. Local police saw nothing unusual. The men involved were old, predictable, and unremarkable. They drank coffee at the same cafes, repaired nets at the same docks, attended family gatherings like everyone else. But scale changes visibility. As shipments grew, so did coordination. Multiple boats began moving together offshore. From the water, it felt normal. From the air, it did not. Spanish authorities had recently invested in aerial surveillance to monitor drug trafficking routes. One night, a patrol plane picked up something strange. Lights far from shore, moving slowly, perfectly spaced. At first, it was dismissed as fishing activity. Then it happened again and again. Analysts noticed patterns. The same nights, the same tide conditions, the same movements. What looked like fishing boats were behaving like a coordinated fleet. Investigators began to dig quietly. No raids, no arrests, just observation. They watched harbors. They tracked boats. They followed paperwork that looked legitimate. But for the first time, the grandfathers were being watched. They did not know it yet. But the ocean was no longer empty, and the net was beginning to close. Part 3. Surveillance changed everything. Spanish authorities moved slowly and quietly. They had learned from past mistakes. Raids without proof only drove smugglers deeper underground. This time, they wanted the entire structure. Undercover agents posed as dock workers, transport contractors, and fuel suppliers. Tracking devices were placed on boats during routine inspections. Financial units followed small, unremarkable transactions that added up over time. Nothing about the grandfathers looked criminal at first glance. That was the problem. The men lived modest lives. Their boats were legal. Their paperwork was clean. But patterns began to emerge. Engines replaced more often than necessary. Boats leaving port during bad weather when fishing made no sense. Fuel consumption that exceeded normal operations. The sky told the clearest story. Aerial patrols documented fleets forming offshore. Boats converged, separated, and returned to port in coordinated silence. Each event aligned with cargo ships passing through known trafficking lanes. Investigators now understood what they were seeing. This was not smuggling by chance. It was logistics. Wiretaps were authorized. Phones that seemed dull and routine suddenly revealed coded language, ice, storms, bad weather. To outsiders, it sounded like fishermen complaining. To analysts, it was a shipping schedule. The grandfathers remained calm. Decades at sea had trained them for pressure. They trusted their rules. No violence, no panic, no mistakes. But pressure creates cracks. A younger associate, brought in to help move product inland, began spending too loudly. New car, new apartment, new friends asking questions. Police followed him, not because he looked dangerous, but because he looked careless. Under questioning for an unrelated offense, he talked. Not much, just enough. Names were not mentioned, but places were, times, habits, enough. To confirm what investigators already suspected, authorities began mapping the entire network. Boats, drivers, storage sites, money flows. Every piece was logged and connected. The goal was no longer seizure. It was dismantling. The grandfathers sensed something was wrong. Meetings grew shorter. Shipments slowed. Some members suggested stopping altogether. Others argued that quitting would attract more attention than continuing. They chose to continue. A massive shipment was planned. It required more boats, more coordination, and more risk. From the air, the operation was impossible to miss. That night, surveillance planes tracked everything. From the cargo ship's position to the moment fishing boats converged in the darkness. Orders were given. Raids would begin at dawn. The men did not run. They did not fight. When police arrived, many were found doing ordinary things. Fixing nets, drinking coffee, sleeping. Years of silence ended in handcuffs. The grandfathers had ruled the Atlantic quietly. And now, quietly, their empire collapsed. Part 4. Dawn broke over Galicia with an unusual stillness. Police raids began simultaneously across the coast. Homes, warehouses, docks, and cafes were entered at the same moment. Officers moved fast and without resistance. There were no shootouts, no chases, just silence and disbelief. Many of the men arrested were still wearing work clothes. Some were in their kitchens. Others were already at the docks, preparing boats that would never leave port again. The shock was visible on faces that had not shown fear in decades. Authorities seized boats, vehicles, warehouses, and millions in cash. Hidden compartments were opened. False walls collapsed. Ledgers disguised as fishing records revealed years of carefully coded transactions. The scale stunned even veteran investigators. Tons of cocaine had passed through Galicia. Not once or twice, but repeatedly. The grandfathers had moved more product than many violent cartels, without leaving bodies behind. Interrogations followed. The men remained quiet. Years of discipline did not break easily. Some refused to speak at all. Others offered partial cooperation, confirming logistics but protecting names. What shocked the public most was who these men were. Grandfathers, neighbors, churchgoers, retired, fishermen who had lived ordinary lives. News footage showed gray hair and weathered faces. Spain watched in disbelief as the image of the violent drug trafficker was replaced by men who looked like anyone's grandfather. Families were devastated. Children learned the truth through television reports. Entire villages were divided between shame and quiet loyalty. Some locals still believed the men had only done what was necessary to survive. Prosecutors built one of the largest drug trafficking cases in Spanish history. Courtrooms filled with defendants, who listened calmly as decades-long sentences were read aloud. The defense argued necessity. The prosecution argued scale. Judges focused on one fact: the operation was not desperate. It was organized, disciplined, and sustained. Convictions followed. Boats were destroyed. Property seized. Accounts frozen. The coastline grew quiet again, but it was a different silence now. For law enforcement, the case became a textbook example. Proof that criminal networks do not always look dangerous. Sometimes they look invisible. For Galicia, the damage ran deeper. An entire generation of maritime knowledge had been turned into a criminal enterprise. Trust within villages was fractured. The sea, once a symbol of survival, had become evidence. Yet even after the trials, one question lingered. Had the grandfathers been criminals first, or men pushed too far by a system that left them behind? That answer depended on who you asked. But one truth remained. The Atlantic had fed them one last time, and then it took everything back.